All right, we're looking at Chapter 11 today. We're moving into finite verb clauses, part 2. So we did subordinate clauses and relative clauses, and today we're going to look at some other kinds of clauses. We're going to start with some nominal clauses, clauses that are called that clauses, and they're called this because they begin with the word that. So that clauses are clauses that start with the word that. The word that is known as a complementizer in these instances. And the clause itself will function as a noun. For example, that the soccer game ended in a tie surprised no one. So that the soccer game ended in a tie is actually the subject of the sentence. It can fit the frame. That the soccer game ended in a tie seemed all right. So it's a nominal phrase. There it was the subject. In this next one, the nominal phrase is a direct object. Our professor told us something. Told us that there will be no exam next week. So you can see how there it's a direct object. They can go about anywhere that a noun could go. So often that clauses are used to represent indirect discourse. We might have a direct quote. Catherine said, "I don't want to intrude," but you could paraphrase that using one of these that clauses. Catherine said that she didn't want to intrude. And now what you've done, if you've turned the dialogue into a direct object in a type 5 sentence. So let's review the many functions of the word that, because we've seen the word that do a number of things. So first of all, the first function of that, remember, it could be a demonstrative determiner. That hat is mine. A second use could be a demonstrative pronoun. That is mine. When it isn't modifying a noun, it's standing for a noun. Remember that it can be a relative pronoun. The hat that you are wearing is mine. And in this case, it has an antecedent. And it'd be an adjective clause. And now we have a new function of the word that. It can be what's called a complementizer. I am shocked that you would take my hat. So look at the difference between 3 and 4. In 3, the word that has a complementizer. You are wearing the hat. In that clause, it has a function. But here, there's no noun right beside it that it's modifying. And it doesn't have a role. You would take my hat that. It doesn't have a role within the dependent clause itself. So looking just at an example from 11.1, a couple of examples, let's create some that clauses, and maybe that can help us to figure out how they function. So let's start with the first sentence where we have an unknown subject. Something disappointed Joel. So if I wanted to create a that clause, with the that clause being the subject, I could say something like, that his favorite show was canceled, disappointed Joel. And that clause is now functioning as the subject of the sentence. Or this, my little teetering lines isn't working as well as I wanted. Scarlett swore something. So we're going to fill in the word something with a that clause, and we end up with Scarlett swore that she would never again date Harvey. So now you can see that clause is functioning as a direct object. So again, let's not confuse relative clauses with nominal that clauses. You know that I don't want to read that book. You know something. So you can work backwards. If you can substitute the word something for the that clause, then you know you have a nominal that clause. But let's look at this next one. The oranges that we bought today are sour. The orange is something or sour? Well, that doesn't work. Further, we see here that the word that precedes this noun oranges. Oranges is an antecedent. Then thirdly, nominal that clauses will fit the frame sentence. That I don't want to read that book seems all right. That we bought today seems all right does not work. So here are some ways that you can distinguish the nominal that clauses from the relative clauses. Sometimes that clauses function as appositives that rename nouns. And I'll be showing you how to do some diagrams for appositives. There are plenty of examples in our text as well. So some that clauses function like an appositive. An appositive renames a noun, like Dr. Jameson, our professor, lives in Savannah. I just gave you an appositive. I named myself twice. Here's an example. Did you hear his comment that there would be no need to pay the fine? So it looks like a relative clause because we have the word that and then we have a noun, but this isn't really the antecedent. The word that there would be no need to pay the fine, has no role in this clause whatsoever. So this is actually in a positive that clause, and because you could leave out the word comment, and you could say, did you hear that there would be no need to pay the fine? Did you hear his comment? You can see how one substitutes for the other as a noun. So, unlike in relative clauses, the word that in the sentence above really does not have an antecedent. It happens to follow a noun, but it is renaming that noun, not introducing an adjective clause describing the noun. Also, as I said, you could omit the noun phrase his comment and just be left with the that clause and still have a perfectly good sentence. Whereas the relative that we saw, you couldn't do that. You can't omit the antecedent of a relative clause. You can say the oranges that we bought today are sour. The oranges are sour. That we bought today are sour does not work. So relative clauses are attached to nouns. Nominal clauses are not. They are nouns or they substitute nouns. So look at the functions of the nominal that clause. Again, pretty much wherever you could have a noun. And when we diagram, you'll see that these clauses are going to go where nouns would go. It's going to be interesting. We're going to have some crazy looking diagrams in this next video. But they can be the subject of a sentence. They can be the direct object. They can be in a type 4 sentence. His idea is that we should remodel the kitchen, noun phrase 1, main verb, link, noun phrase 1. Sometimes they're adjective complements. If they follow an adjective, I am sorry that you have lost your car keys. And then sometimes they're a positive. I've never understood the argument that gravity waves are undetectable. Okay, we have a supplementary video where I'll be diagramming some nominal that clauses for you. So we're ready to move to the other kind of nominal clause in Chapter 11, and these are interrogative clauses that can also function nominally. And often they're used to express indirect questions. And here's some examples. He asked a question. He asked when we would be leaving. So you can see how when we would be leaving is functioning as a noun in that sentence. When we would be leaving seems all right. It fits the frame. I know what you did last summer. You might have seen that old movie. In it, what you did last summer is functioning as a noun. And again, it could go about anywhere a noun would go. What you did last summer was horrifying. See how it could be a subject? Note all of these interrogative nominal clauses will fit the noun frame sentence. That's your test. So be careful not to confuse relative pronouns and interrogative noun clauses. Remember, we talked about, really relative adverbs, I should say. This is let's go back. I didn't do my wiggles on this one. This is the place where I grew up. Here, place is our noun, and where is a relative adverb, and it is its antecedent is place. But here, do you know where I grew up? Where I grew up, that clause is not functioning as an adjective. So that's nominal, and this one is relative. So I did make a mistake here, relative. It should say adverb rather than a relative pronoun. But remember, the relative clause itself is an adjective. That goes back to Chapter 10. So interrogative clauses, like nominal clauses, can function about anywhere you could put a noun. There's one where it's the subject of a sentence. What I really want is a chocolate ice cream cone. Here's one where it's a direct object. I see what you have drawn. Here's one in a type 4. This is where I kept my treasures. And by the way, the relative adverb itself, the relative interrogative rather, can be any of the why, where, how, when, any of those words. And it could be an object complement. I know the reason why you left the party. It can be the object of a preposition. I am concerned about what you will find under my sofa. And those are really interesting to diagram because the noun phrase will be an entire clause that comes off the preposition. And in indirect discourse, he asked when the delivery would arrive, which is basically a direct object. So it can have all of those functions. And I will be diagramming some of these for you as well in the supplementary video. And that's it. That's what you need for Chapter 11. Everybody have a great day. Bye-bye.